5 influential African leaders of the 20th century. In an era molded by ideology and post-colonial battles, Africa has produced influential people. Despite sometimes disregarded in the field of geopolitics, Africa has had a significant part and impact on global political processes in the 20th century. Africa has served as a testing ground for numerous ideas, some of which have been wildly successful and some of which have failed miserably, since it was a center for colonial and decolonial practice. Since the end of World War II, it has also served as a battlefield for ideologies, with numerous proxy conflicts fought over the continent as the US and the USSR sought to establish dominance. Amidst the chaos, African leaders surfaced who would influence their nations, either positively or negatively. These 5 African presidents of the 20th century are among the most significant. Number 5. Quamen Kuma. Quamen Kuma was born in 1909 and received his education in the US, fought non-stop to free the Gold Coast from British rule. Marcus Garvey, a black American leader, and Marx Lenin were amongst his main sources of inspiration. He went back to the Gold Coast in 1947 and took up the position of Secretary of the United Gold Coast Convention. His desire for independence from Britain grew more radical, and he founded the Convention People's Party to coordinate peaceful demonstrations and large-scale action in support of his demands for instantaneous independence. After it became apparent that the Convention People's Party may pose a significant threat to the British, Nkrumah was released from prison. In 1952, Nkrumah was chosen to lead the Gold Coast as Prime Minister. British Togoland and the Gold Coast united to form Ghana in 1957, the year the nation gained complete independence. It was instantly evident that Quamen Kuma would rule in an authoritarian manner when he approved of detention without charge of trial. Nevertheless, he gained a lot of support for his efforts to develop infrastructure. Nkrumah was elected President of Ghana after the country became a republic in 1960. He ran a relentless campaign, seeing the goal of his endeavors as the creation of the United States of Africa. He was more concerned with advancing Pan-Africanism than managing his own nation, which led to Ghana's economic problems resulting from disastrous projects. Nevertheless, Ghana became a one-party state and Nkrumah declared himself president for life. With self-serving politicians in charge, the nation descended into corruption, and Nkrumah withdrew from public life following a 1962 assassination attempt. Nkrumah then went into exile when the military took control of Ghana in 1966 while he was on a tour to China. He passed away from cancer in 1972. Due to his anti-colonial views and independence struggle, Quamen Kuma gained a great deal of notoriety and popularity. He is now regarded as a significant African leader who championed Pan-Africanism throughout the continent. Number 4. Idi Amin. Idi Amin Dada Ume reigned over Uganda from 1971 to 1979, a particularly cruel period in the nation's history. Idi Amin, a member of the Kakwa ethnic group, a tiny minority in northern Uganda, was born in 1924. He enlisted in the British colonial army's King's African Rifles at an early age and was employed as a cook. From 1952 on to 1956, he supported the British colonial forces in Kenya during the Mau Mau Rebellion. As he advanced through the ranks, Idi Amin became one of the few Africans to hold the rank of officer by the time Uganda gained independence in 1962. Amin made friends with Milton Obote, the newly appointed President and Prime Minister of Africa, and the later appointed Amin Chief of the Air Force in addition to the army. But the two men drifted apart over the ensuing years, and in 1971, Idi Amin staged a military takeover and took control. Strong nationalism characterized Idi Amin's reign for the following 8 years. He drove Asians out of his nation and punished some Ugandan tribes. It is estimated that 300,000 or more people died as a result of his leadership. He invaded Tanzania in 1978 and the Tanzanians overran the capital city of Uganda, Kampala, the following year, ending his tenure. After leaving the nation, Idi Amin resided in Saudi Arabia until his passing in 2003. Number 3. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, arguably the most well-known African leader to date, is a symbol of adversity, liberation, harmony, and forgiveness. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born in 1918 in the Transkei region of South Africa. He received his education at the University College of Port Harcourt and the University of Witwatersrand, where he pursued his legal studies. He got involved in resistance to the apartheid practices of the minority white people and the government of South Africa in the 1940s after joining the African National Congress. As a result of Nelson Mandela's advocacy, the African National Congress established Mkonto Menzizwe, or the Spear of the Nation. He was a defendant rather than an attorney, and he spent time in and out of court. He was given a life sentence after it was shown that he planned to overthrow the country. Nelson Mandela altered his perspective on life and completed his education via correspondence while he was incarcerated. Even though he was still in favor of black sovereignty in South Africa, he turned pacifist after seeing that apartheid had stripped black people of their dignity and made white people harsh. Mandela promoted total equality and the abolition of the desire for retaliation. Apartheid was unsustainable by the late 1980s, and the F.W. de Klerk-led South African government concluded that granting black people political authority was the only way to prevent civil war. Nelson Mandela was freed from jail in 1990 on the condition that black people would not seek retribution. Following the first completely democratic election, Mandela was elected president in 1994. During his presidency from 1994 to 1999, he oversaw reconciliation. Significant attempts were made to unite the various racial groupings and to promote South Africa as a diverse but inclusive nation that protected human rights and freedom for all citizens, regardless of background or color. In 1993, F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Nelson Mandela utilized South Africa's 1995 Rugby World Cup hosting as a platform to galvanize the people of his country. South Africa ultimately emerged victorious in the competition, and for a fleeting instant, the entire country united. Nelson Mandela mostly withdrew from public life following his presidency and passed away on December 5, 2012 at the age of 95. Number 2. Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe is well known for leading Zimbabwe to independence and liberation from the white minority government under Ian Smith, but he is also criticized for his harsh authoritarian style of rule, which attracted a lot of political attention from opponents of his administration. Robert Gabriel Mugabe, as he was called, who was born in 1924, attended the University of Fort Hare in South Africa before relocating to Ghana to work as a teacher. After his return to Rhodesia, the former Zimbabwe, in 1960, he founded the Zimbabwe African National Union, or the ZANU, in the ensuing years. He was in prison from 1964 to 1974, during which he launched a party coup and assumed total command of ZANU. Rhodesia was engulfed in a civil war from 1964 to 1979, as the black majority waged guerrilla wars against their colonial authorities while the white minority tried to maintain their control. After being freed from prison in 1974, Robert Mugabe joined the conflict. When the war came to an end in 1979, Robert Mugabe easily emerged victorious to lead the ZANU-PF party. In the initial years of his rule, he achieved significant progress in rapprochement, establishing alliances between the Shona and Ndebele communities, and crucially, providing security to the white farmers who were the backbone of Zimbabwe's economy. These compromises and peace efforts proved short-lived. In the midst of severe economic crisis, he returned Zimbabwe into a one-party state by the end of the decade. There were elections, but they were marred by intimidation and bloodshed. The resistance increased over time. With the economy of Zimbabwe still in freefall and dwindling, Morgan Tsvangirai founded the Movement for Democratic Change in 1999. The ZANU-PF continued to hold power despite the MDC winning over half of the parliamentary seats in the 2000 election. People identifying as war veterans utilized violence during this period to demand land reform, even though many of them were far too young to have served in the military. Their acts caused large-scale evacuation of white farmers from Zimbabwe, which resulted in a serious food shortage and an economic disaster. Mugabe's adoption of measures to permit expropriation of land owned by white people made this worse. Over 50% of the farmers departed Zimbabwe. The nation's decline persisted, with inflation reaching 100,000%. Mugabe's mental and physical health was also deteriorating, but rigged elections kept him in office. Eventually in 2017, a military coup overthrew him and Emmerson Mnangagwa assumed the presidency. In 2019, Robert Mugabe passed away at the age of 95. Number 1. Thomas Sankara. Many people refer to Thomas Sankara as the Che Guevara of Africa. He was born in 1949 in Upper Volta, which is now part of Burkina Faso. He chose to pursue a military career against his parents' wishes for him to become a priest. He experienced populist uprisings, communist ideology, and the horrors of war early in his career while serving as a soldier in Mali. Sankara was a man of great charisma and reputed for his honesty. Despite holding high positions in the government, His political rivals viewed him as a dangerous one because of these qualities. Sankara was detained by President Ouadraogo, but in 1983 he managed to escape from prison and took over office as Burkina Faso's president. He put into effect a number of effective socialist programs during his brief presidency, by emphasizing equality, education, and ecological preservation. He transformed healthcare and significantly decreased the newborn death rate. He improved access to education and gave women more authority. He planted 10 million plants to stop the desert from getting worse. The conservative portion of the nation criticized him despite his enormous success because he disagreed with his progressive policies and anti-imperialist views. A scheme involving France, the CIA, and former President Blaise Compaoré resulted in the assassination of Thomas Sankara in 1987. Compaoré went on to take over the government and rule until his retirement in 2014, at which point he left the nation. In 2021, Compaoré and his accomplices were tried in absentia by a tribunal, which found Compaoré guilty of murder and sentenced him to life in prison. One of the greatest African leaders, Thomas Sankara, was assassinated at just the age of 37, similar to many other revolutionaries. Of course, Patrice Lumumba, Haile Selassie, and Muammar Gaddafi are only a handful of the many notable African leaders who should be acknowledged. Africa is a large continent with a vast number of powerful African leaders. While some of them were helpful dictators, many of them were cruel ones. They were monarchs and emperors, capitalists and Marxists, leaders of the white minority, and rebels. Africa has produced some tremendously interesting leaders who have guided their countries through the upheavals of a developing continent, ranging from the hated and reviled to the adored and revered. Tell us what we forgot to mention in the comment section below, and please subscribe for more educative videos like this one.